a $20 servo hidden in Junkyard Lincolns and F-250s turned Secretary Special Mustangs into tire-shredding monsters. Today we're exposing the Ford C6 Intermediate Servo, the bolt-on weapon that separated real builders from posers. This is the secret Ford C6 transmission upgrade you never knew existed. Smash that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment about your favorite hidden Ford trick. Part 1. The birth of a heavyweight. The year was 1966. Ford had just unleashed something serious into the automotive world. The C6 Select Shift automatic transmission, a heavy-duty 3-speed built to handle everything Ford could throw at it. This wasn't the lightweight C4 for compacts and intermediates. No, this was the big boy. The transmission Ford bolted behind 428 Cobra jets, 429 Boss engines, 460 big blocks. The gearbox that had to survive brutal torque numbers that would twist lesser transmissions into scrap metal. Built around a Simpson planetary gear set just like its little brother, the C6 was wrapped in a one-piece aluminum case with an integrated bell housing. Weight came in at 140 pounds dry, plus another 30 for the torque converter. Ford used over 10 pounds of powdered metal components to keep weight down while maintaining strength. The gear ratios were locked in from day one: 2.46 to 1 in first gear, 1.46 to 1 in second, direct drive in third, and 2.18 to 1 in fourth, 1 in reverse. Ford engineers nailed the formula and barely changed it through 3 decades of production. But Ford had engineered something brilliant into this transmission, something that most people never understood. The intermediate servo system, located on the passenger side of the case, accessible from outside the transmission, sat an aluminum servo cover bolted on with just a few bolts. Underneath that cover lived a piston, a spring, and a small amount of hydraulic magic. This servo controlled the intermediate band, the flexible steel band, that wrapped around the drum to grab second gear. When the valve body said it was time to shift, hydraulic pressure hit that servo piston, pushed it against spring resistance, and applied the band. Basic mechanical physics at work. The genius was in the design. Ford made dozens of different servo pistons for different applications. Small apply diameter for grocery getters, large apply diameter for performance cars and trucks. Every servo was stamped with a code letter on the cover: N servo, S servo, G, J, L, D, P, and then the big boys: the H servo from heavy-duty trucks, and the legendary R servo from 429 Cobra jet Mustangs and high-performance applications. The difference? Apply area. The N servo had a measly 1.93-inch apply diameter. The R servo? A massive 2.48-inch diameter with a 3.5-inch release area. More piston area meant more clamping force on that intermediate band. More force meant harder, faster, cleaner shifts. Part 2. The Ford Compromise. Walk into any Ford dealership in 1970 and the problem was right there in the showroom. A gorgeous Mustang Boss 429 with its shaker hood and Calypso coral paint, sitting next to a Mercury Marquis land yacht with the same basic C6 transmission. Ford faced an impossible engineering challenge. They needed one transmission architecture to serve 2 completely different masters. In the muscle car, it had to survive repeated full-throttle launches and handle north of 450 foot-pounds of torque. In the luxury car, it needed to shift like silk, so nobody complained about harsh engagement during the country club run. So Ford got clever. Instead of building completely different transmissions, they used different servos and different apply levers inside the same basic case. The N servo went into base model cars with small engines, soft shifts, gentle engagement, happy customers who never pushed the throttle past half. The S and G servos were slight upgrades for mid-level applications, but order a 428 Cobra jet or a 429 Super Cobra jet, and suddenly you got different hardware, the D, L, or P servo for serious applications, the H servo from heavy-duty F-250 trucks. And if you were lucky enough to get a factory race car or a police interceptor package, sometimes you got the R-code servo. The apply levers added another layer of complexity. These levers acted as mechanical multipliers. An A lever provided a 1.65 to 1 ratio. A B lever bumped it to 1.73 to 1. But the F lever? A full 2.3 to 1 multiplication of apply force. Combine an R servo with an F lever, and you had shifts that would literally crack the aluminum case if you weren't careful. Too much force, too much clamping pressure, and that band adjustment stud would rip right through the case wall. The catch? Ford buried this information in service manuals and parts catalogs. There was no advertisement saying, upgrade your servo for performance. If you wanted your Galaxie to shift like it had some fight, you had to figure it out yourself. And that's exactly where the hot rod community got creative. Part 3. The Junkyard Gold Rush. By 1970, word was spreading through Ford performance circles like wildfire. The Junkyard guys knew something. When they tore down wrecked C6 transmissions, the servos were all different. Pull the servo cover off a base model LTD with a 351 Windsor 2-barrel. N servo. Tiny piston, soft spring, nothing special. Pull the servo cover off a 1970 Lincoln Continental Mark III with the 460H servo. Big piston, serious spring, built for luxury car torque. Pull the servo cover off a wrecked 1971 Mustang Boss 351 R servo, the holy grail. The largest factory servo Ford ever produced, with apply area 25 to 35% larger than common servos. The modification became stupidly simple. The C6 servo was externally mounted. You didn't need to drop the transmission. You didn't need to pull the valve body. Just get under the car, remove 4 bolts from the passenger side servo cover, pull the old servo out, drop the R-code servo in, bolt it back up. 15 minutes of work, $20 for a Junkyard servo. Maybe 30 if you hit the Ford dealer parts counter, first test drive, and suddenly your Torino grabbed second gear like it had been kicked in the teeth. That lazy, soft 1 to 2 shift? Gone. Now it hit with authority. The 2 to 3 shift cleaned up too. No more slippage or hesitation. Just firm, confident gear changes that let you know the transmission was working. This became the ultimate sleeper modification. Picture a bone stock 1972 Ford Galaxie 500. Hubcaps, bench seat, vinyl roof. The kind of car your uncle drove to his accounting job. Nothing about it screamed performance. But inside that C6, someone who knew their Ford transmissions had swapped in an R servo from a wrecked F-250. Light turns green. The Galaxie launches. Instead of that mushy delayed shift at 3,500 RPM, it stays in first until 5,200. Grabs second with a bark of the tires. That Roadrunner next to you? He's wondering what just happened to Grandpa's Ford. The beauty was complete reversibility. If you went to the drag strip and wanted even harder shifts, swap to an F-apply lever. If you wanted street manners back, bolt the stock N servo back in. 20 minutes and you could transform the transmission's personality. Part 4. The science behind the snap. So, how exactly did a bigger piston and stiffer spring turn the C6 into a performance transmission? Let's dig into the hydraulics. The C6 intermediate servo works on basic physics. Hydraulic pressure multiplied by piston area equals apply force. When the valve body sends oil pressure to the servo during a 1 to 2 shift, that pressure has to overcome spring resistance and push the piston to apply the intermediate band. The N servo had 1.93 inches of apply diameter. Calculate the area and you get roughly 2.93 square inches of surface for hydraulic pressure to work against. With 150 psi of line pressure, that's about 440 pounds of apply force. The R servo had 2.48 inches of apply diameter. Same math gets you 4.83 square inches of surface area. Same 150 psi of line pressure. Now generates 725 pounds of apply force. 65% more clamping pressure on that intermediate band. More clamping force meant the band grabbed harder and faster. Less slip during the shift. Less heat generation. Cleaner power transfer from the engine to the drive shaft. The apply levers multiplied this force even further. An A lever with its 1.65 to 1 ratio took those 725 pounds and turned them into nearly 1,200 pounds at the band. An F lever at 2.3 to 1 generated over 1,600 pounds of band force. The really clever builders understood the balance. They knew that too much force could crack the case or destroy the band. The magic combination for most street applications was an H or R servo with a D or E apply lever. Enough force for firm shifts without breaking expensive parts. But here's where things got dangerous. Some builders started modifying servos themselves. They'd drill and tap the case, plug oil passages, remove seals from dual piston servos to increase apply area. These modifications could work on the drag strip for a few passes. But on the street, they created problems. Excessive practice force would crack the case around the band adjustment stud. The aluminum housing couldn't handle the stress. Bands would break. Servo covers would warp and leak. Professional transmission builders warned against going too aggressive. The factory R servo, with a moderate apply lever, was plenty for most applications. The guys who tried to hot rod beyond that, they usually ended up with expensive transmission repairs. The 2 to 3 shift flare was another issue with overly aggressive servos. Push too hard on the 1 to 2 shift, and the 2 to 3 shift would slip and flare, RPM spiking before third gear engaged. It was all about system balance. Part 5. The complete system approach. Here's what separated weekend tinkerers from real transmission builders. They understood the servo didn't work alone. It was part of a complete hydraulic system. And changing one component meant retuning everything else. The smart builders never just bolted in an R servo and walked away. They installed a proper shift kit first, B and M Transpac Trans Go Stage 2, or broader performance kits that modified valve body calibrations and increased line pressure. They'd adjust band clearances precisely. The intermediate band adjustment was critical. Too loose and it would slip even with the R servo. Too tight and it would drag, creating heat and wearing the band prematurely. The spec was usually around 1 to 1.5 turns out from initial contact, but it varied by application. The governor got attention too. Stock C6 governors shifted at conservative RPM for fuel economy. Performance builders would lighten the governor weights or install high RPM governor kits to hold gears longer, letting the engine reach its power peak before shifting. Some builders went even deeper. They'd swap to a manual valve body with a reverse shift pattern, giving full manual control over gear selection. Combined with the R servo, this turned the C6 into a proper race transmission that shifted only when you told it to. The combination of R servo, F apply lever, shift kit, and manual valve body created something special. A transmission that could drive to the grocery store in drive with reasonable manners, then transform into something savage at the drag strip in manual mode. But you had to be careful. Combine an R servo with an F or FF lever without proper supporting modifications, and you could crack the case. The FF lever at 2.82 to 1 ratio generated so much force that even Ford warned against using it with large servos. The best builders understood that every component affected every other component. Line pressure, governor weights, valve body calibrations, band adjustments, servo size, apply lever ratio. Change one and the whole system shifted. Master all of them, and you had a C6 that shifted exactly how you wanted it. Part 6. The Modern Revival. By 1996, when the last traditional C6 rolled off the production line, conventional wisdom said this technology was obsolete. The E4OD with electronic controls and overdrive had taken over. 4 speeds, computer management, lockup torque converter. The purely hydraulic C6 seemed like a dinosaur. Except nobody told the drag racers and off-road enthusiasts. Today, C6 transmissions are more popular than ever in serious performance applications. Coyote-swapped vintage Fords, LS-powered street rods, modern big block builds making 4-digit horsepower. Builders choose the C6 for one simple reason. It's virtually indestructible when built properly. And that's servo modification? Still one of the first things performance builders address. In fact, it's better now than it's ever been. Modern companies like TCI, Sonax, and Superior produce billet aluminum R-code servos machined to tighter tolerances than Ford ever achieved. These modern servos feature improved sealing with O-rings and Teflon components, better springs with multiple rate options, and precision machined surfaces. Some modern servos are single-piston designs that eliminate the complexity of the dual-piston factory units. Others use lip seals instead of O-rings for better static seal into third gear. The engineering has evolved, while the basic principle remains the same. Performance transmission shops now catalog complete servo and lever combinations for specific applications. Building a street-driven 460 that needs to tow occasionally? H-servo with E-lever. Building an all-out drag car with a stroked 429? R-servo with F-lever and welded intermediate band to handle the stress. The C6 has become the transmission of choice for serious Ford performance. Trans brake applications, air-shifted valve bodies, full manual race setups. The bulletproof reputation earned in the 1960s and 70s still holds true today. Part 7. Why it still matters. Here's what nobody talks about regarding the C6 intermediate servo. It represents something we've almost completely lost in modern performance culture: the ability to fundamentally improve your transmission with basic tools and mechanical understanding. Today, automatic transmission performance means spending thousands on a complete rebuild or buying an aftermarket unit. Click a few buttons, bolt it in, write the check. It works, sure. It's reliable, it's fast. But there's something fundamentally different about crawling under your F-250 with a socket set and swapping a servo in 15 minutes. Something visceral about understanding that the piston diameter and apply lever ratio determine how your transmission shifts. The C6 servo teaches you about hydraulic force multiplication, about mechanical advantage through lever ratios, about the balance between apply force and system durability. It forces you to understand what's actually happening inside that aluminum case when you shift gears. And when you nail it, when you find that perfect combination that makes your Torino shift firm at wide open throttle but still behaves in traffic, that satisfaction is something no credit card purchase can replicate. You feel connected to your transmission, you understand its personality, you know that when you mat the throttle and feel that hard 1-2 shift, it's because you chose the right servo. You made those decisions, you did that work. The C6 intermediate servo never got magazine covers, never had feature articles about it. It just sat there on the side of the case, doing its job, a simple aluminum piston that most people never thought about. But in the hands of those who understood it, this servo changed everything. It turned luxury land yachts into sleepers. It gave police interceptors the shifts they needed to catch bad guys. It let everyday Ford enthusiasts tune their transmissions for the cost of a tank of gas and 15 minutes under the car. And it's still doing it today. Still teaching a new generation that sometimes the simplest solution, refined over decades, beats any expensive modern alternative. The C6 was in production for 30 years. Think about that. 3 decades of the same basic design because Ford nailed it the first time. That servo system was part of that brilliance. simple, effective, tunable, through mechanical means. The best performance modifications are often the ones that require knowledge instead of money. The ones that teach you how things actually work instead of just bolting on parts and hoping for the best. Next time, we're diving into another forgotten piece of transmission history, the Chrysler A833 detent ball, the 25-cent part that made or broke your quarter-mile times and separated championship drivers from also-rans. Make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share this with your fellow Ford enthusiasts. Drop a comment about what hidden Ford trick you'd like us to uncover next. Until then, keep building, keep learning. And remember that sometimes the most powerful modifications cost $20 and 15 minutes. The ones that separate those who understand their machines from those who just throw money at them. Now get out there and make some magic happen.